Just like that. And I'm hot. How about that? Well, good morning. And welcome to the philosophy of mind, theory of consciousness. We're running, right? Oh, okay. Anyway, let me look at my watch. Okay, so here we are. I'll begin with a question, one that I never have asked anyone else, only myself. While pondering, I'll say, how did I get to be me? That's a strange thing to ask. It leads to other questions like, what are you talking about? Or who's asking? Because if I'm only referring to this body, to this fortuitous concourse of atoms, oh, is this on? I don't see if it is. Yeah. This fortuitous concourse of atoms, by the way, I'm borrowing a phrase from Sir Arthur Eddington in his Nature of the Physical World, which I would recommend to anyone. If I'm only referring to the body, then the question is really only as mysterious as how did anything get to be anything? But really, that itself is a profound question, especially when you consider that science stopped asking the question a long time ago. You see, with the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, the world was a pretty straightforward place. It was seen to be a materialistic, deterministic world and followed natural laws of causation and conservation. But when it came to describing what something was rather than what it did, scientists took the approach that Newton took when he was describing his law of gravity. He said with embarrassment that he didn't know how it worked, but that it did. And so that's the tack that scientists have taken. And so let's talk about Michael Faraday now. When he presented his explanation and description of electric fields, a lot of scientists started to wonder, do these fields really exist? Are they real? Are they really real? Or are they just mathematical constructs that help explain the experimental results? Today, we've forgotten that we ever asked the question. Tesla's work and his, he presented, Tesla, when he used alternating current in his power transmission systems, he found almost no power loss at all because, as he knew would happen because of mathematics, with a balanced multi-phase system, the real components of the phasors, the ones that don't cancel, are imaginary. In other words, multiplied by the square root of -1. And so the power, there's almost zero power lost in the transmission lines because the power that's being transmitted is imaginary. Okay. Schrodinger equation in physics is entirely imaginary, although it provides everything you could possibly know about an elementary particle. You can see that there's the I in front of the equation. That's the imaginary number, square root of -1. Its solutions, by the way, are infinite in number, and they collapse to a single solution once the particle is observed. This is according to the Copenhagen interpretation, which is still mainstream today. The requirement that the observer is conscious is not a serious consideration. Nobody talks about it. Now, Einstein, his Nobel Prize was for his description of light as a particle, his particle nature of light, and as evidenced in the photoelectric effect. He chose to ignore the fact that light had already been proven to be wave-like in nature by Newton. And so, along with Louis de Broglie, if I'm pronouncing that right, he completed the symmetry with his concept of a matter wave. And so the scientific community had to accustom itself to this paradoxical wave-particle duality in nature at the microscopic level. Paul Dirac, a hero, he discovered the electron spin and antimatter through mathematics alone. And he helped formulate quantum physics. When he was asked, what does it all mean? He famously replied, shut up and calculate. Yeah, his practical call to focus on the power, the predictive power of mathematics, and to ignore philosophical questions about reality have been generally, that's the consensus in the scientific community to this present day. As physics got stranger and stranger, from Ernest Rutherford's discovery that matter is almost entirely empty space, to Einstein's proof that matter, mass, and energy are equivalent, and that mass can collapse into black holes, and that experiments show that through entangled particles that the universe is, it doesn't, okay, so quantum physics violates Bell's theorem, which then shows that the universe is locally non-realistic. All right, so anyway, what has happened now is that what was the material world has become the physical world. And the physical world now encompasses not just mass and time and space, but force fields, quantum fields, virtual particles, extraspatial dimensions, probabilities, as well as mathematics in general. And so what was the physical world has become, or what was the material world has become the physical world. But nowhere do you see a definition of time or space or mass other than in circular form. For example, when Einstein was asked, he replied that time is what the clock says it is. Okay, and interestingly, I think, nowhere will you find a penalty clause. Like in a contract, you have a penalty clause if you break the law. Okay, there's no penalty clause, and nowhere will you find an enforcing agent that will make sure that universal conformity to these laws. And so anyway, my point is that this body of mine, all objective and physical as it obviously is quite mysterious in its own right. But that's not what I'm asking when I ask the question, how did I get to be me? I'm talking about the I inside of me, the homunculus that sits at the driver's seat behind the windows of my eyes. I'm asking, how did my mind wind up in this body? Now, the concept of mind apart from brain is a commonly held notion and an ancient notion. The Atman in Hindu religions is the innermost self that is reincarnated over and again. Plato's soul was also reincarnated into subsequent bodies, not always human. René Descartes' first principles, I think, therefore I am, describe the notion and express the notion that the subjective consciousness is really the only thing that we know for certainty exists at all. Okay, he went so far as to locate the mind within the, how do you pronounce it, the pineal gland. Yeah. They didn't know what else that gland did. It's right down in the center of the brain like that, so I figured that's got to be it. And he even called it the principal seat of the soul, suggesting that spirits interacted with us through it. But along with the Age of Enlightenment and the scientific revolution and all its successes, came this notion, or this conviction actually, that only physical entities existed. Physical entities that could be objectively quantified and manipulated within the scope of science. They're the only things that exist in the universe. And so since only physical entities could change other physical entities' state, a non-physical entity like a mind, if it existed at all, could never cause a physical entity like an arm to move. That would violate the conservation of energy law in natural physics. The determinism specified by laws of cause and effect makes the capacity for making choices that are not dictated by past events impossible. In other words, free will cannot and does not exist. And since the subjective first-person experience of the taste of coffee can't be measured, it doesn't exist either. It's not a part of the universe. It doesn't exist. Okay, but these conclusions contradict our own view of ourselves. Scientific psychology, which emerged at the end of the 19th century, struggled to reconcile these differences, but eventually abandoned the effort to define the mind at all, similarly to the way that science abandoned efforts to define time and space and mass. However, what's this? What happened? Okay, this is right here, I do recognize. This signifies, this is scientific psychology here, which emerged in the 19th century. Okay, however, William James, a hero of mine, in 1890, published his monumental Principles of Psychology, and he bucked the trend of just defining, behavior. Anyway, totaling 1,200 pages in 2 volumes, which took 12 years to complete. This was a person-centered survey of everything that was then known of the mind and the brain. It is the earliest English language publication that is still widely cited today in regards to psychology. However, in 1890, his Ingersoll lecture, by the way, at Harvard in 1897, expressed an alternative explanation for the correlation between mental states and physical states. Rather than the production model in which the brain produces consciousness, he suggested a transmission model or a permission model. He noted that music heard on a radio is correlated to the physical states of its circuits. But the source of the music is external to the radio, and it's remote. Similarly to the way that radio receives, filters, and modulates unseen electromagnetic waves to play music, the source of which is external and remote, the brain might receive and filter consciousness from a remote source. The correlation between brain states and mental states does not prove that the brain produces consciousness, in other words. Noteworthy for me, James's varieties of a religious experience had a profound effect on this man, Bill W., founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, who read it cover to cover when he was still struggling with his own alcoholism. The book AA, the big book, cites William James in 2 places. In the chapter 2, there is a solution, and in the appendix. Frederick H.W. Myers was a contemporary of James's, and he shared his interest in studying the mind through scientific research. For Myers, the main goal was testing the possibility of life after death. The mind and the brain, if they're distinct, functionally distinct, then, he concluded, consciousness could continue after death. The logical argument against it would have been removed, if that's correct. His 2-volume Human Personality and Its Survival of Bodily Death was a 1,360-page publication that presented his research into the unconscious mind. It cites cases of automatic writing, hypnosis, psi phenomena to support his theory of a mental world beyond the physical world. It greatly impressed Aldous Huxley and William James, but most psychologists derided it in general and dogmatic terms. That's pretty well ignored. After J.B. Watson published his Psychology as the Behavioralist Views It in 1919, psychology became the science of behavior. A purely objective, this is a quote from him, purely objective experimental branch of natural science. According to Watson, psychology should never, quoting again, never use terms consciousness, mental states, mind, and the like. Instead, it should identify lawful relationships between stimuli and responses. Rather than researching and describing the mind, psychology had become a much narrower clinical field focused only on behavior. This trend towards functionalism, as it's called, was solidified by Sigmund Freud, and the focus on what mental states do rather than what they are has continued as mainstream to the present day. In the mid to late 20th century, the computational model, the computational theory of the mind, CTM, gained traction. As another form of functionalism, it compared neural networks to computer systems, computational systems, and in support, it supposed somehow that consciousness would emerge from complex signaling networks. This theory, however, has been single-handedly dismantled by John Searle with his version of the Chinese room thought experiment, if you're familiar, in his 1980 paper, Mind's Brain and Programs. The philosopher David Chalmers coined the terms the easy problems and the hard problem of consciousness to effectively challenge the behavioral and mechanistic approach to studying the mind. His use of the phrase easy problem is tongue-in-cheek, and these could include explaining through physical systems, a person's ability to integrate information or to discriminate or to perform functions, behavioral functions. But the hard problem of consciousness is categorically different because there is no mechanistic way that you can explain an experience. And so, Bernardo Kastrup, another hero, has recently gained a lot of recognition for his contributions to studies of consciousness through his formulation of what he calls analytic idealism. Now, idealism is just the theory that everything is mental, that all of this is what doesn't exist, but consciousness is the only thing that does exist. And anyway, Kastrup says that his analytic idealism is just a modern dressing of what the people in the Indus Valley knew eons ago. Anyway, he says there is no hard mind-body problem like Chalmers described it because he says everything is mental, there is no body. By the way, Eddington, oops, where'd he go? He's not there. I thought we had Eddington. So we're going to have to just imagine that Eddington is back up on the screen. Eddington was an idealist himself. He started out as kind of a panpsychist, where he presumed that mind is within all matter to some form, but then kind of leaned towards idealism towards the end. Now, Eddington, again, was the one of the few people who actually understood Einstein's general theory of relativity as it was published, and spent a lot of time explaining it to other people. And he verified the validity of the theory during a total solar eclipse by measuring the extent that starlight is bent around the sun due to its gravity, due to its mass. Schrodinger, who I thought was up here too, was the Schrodinger equation, was also an idealist, by the way. And so these smart people, my point is that these smart physicists, these objective calculators, had their philosophies too that were pretty radical. Okay, so finally, you're messing with me, Jones. Okay, all right, so anyway, the 2007 book Irreducible Mind, which I would really suggest as reading. Written by this man right here, Edward Kelly, PhD from Harvard. It's an 800-page publication that describes the history of psychology and the philosophy of mind. It strongly praises the early works by Frederick Myers and William James. And it follows their approach by reviewing all available evidence related to the mind in an attempt to begin a course towards discovering what the mind actually is. Kelly and his colleagues at the University of Virginia research anomalous and exceptional cases. Jones, I hope I got some more slides here like that one. Okay, so they research unusual and exceptional cases with the idea that these will shed light on the more normal, everyday people among us. As an example is this one here. This case right here was reported in the journal Nature, International Weekly Journal of Science, July 2007. It's titled "The Man with a Hole in His Brain." This guy went to the doctor with a sore leg. And after they looked him over and stuff, they found that 90% of his brain was missing due to encephalitis. Okay? He had a normal life. He had a family, he worked. His IQ was measured to be 84, which is kind of low, but still, he was perfectly socially apt, according to a cognitive psychologist at the University of Libre in Brussels. Okay, and so that's interesting, an unusual case. Incredible Mind devotes an entire chapter to a lot of things, but chapter to near-death experiences. Now, near-death experiences, after the publication, okay, you might remember the popular book, Life After Life. It was published in 1975 by Raymond A. Moody, and after that, there was a surge in interest and in research on near-death experiences. Kelly reports in his book in 2007 that the University of Virginia's department had studied already 861 cases. These are scientific studies. These aren't just anecdotal words, And so anyway, there are thousands of these worldwide. Many of these involve survivors of cardiac arrest and their experiences under general anesthesia, conditions where you would expect no consciousness at all. Okay, so let me see, before I go on, I'll tell you that awareness of peculiar motions by the surgeon during this procedure. For instance, one example, the surgeon's pointing with his elbows because he didn't want to get his hands on anything, or conversations between the doctor and relatives down the hall, outside the room, are reported from people who shouldn't be conscious at all. And these things can be verified. This is kind of evidence that we're looking at. And I'll tell you, I've met two people who have told me about their near-death experiences. One is a friend of mine. I've known him for years. His name is Todd. He suffered cardiac arrest, and he was under general anesthesia. And while he was under anesthetic, he was visited by a mutual friend of ours named Leon. Leon came to see him. And afterwards, he found out that Leon had died that very day. And so now Todd had been interviewed and questioned after he recovered and gains consciousness. And this is pretty typical now, because when somebody is under cardiac arrest, these researchers want to know what happened. Did they have another near-death experience? And so Todd didn't understand the questions, and he didn't appreciate them at all. And he didn't even like talking to me about it. But anyway, I have a research, by the way, that I can share that categorizes 325 different theories of consciousness. And these include the entire range: monistic, dualistic, panpsychic, epiphenomenalistic, the anthropic principle. Everything is listed here. And my point is that it seems that nobody has any idea what consciousness actually is, and everybody is guessing. Okay? And so they are. But if I don't tell you, you might wonder what my theory is. The theory that I call the truth. No. Yeah. Okay, who do I think I am? And how do I think I got into this body? Well, I'll let you know, first of all, that I've had, some of you know, my own spiritual experience. All right? And this wasn't like the one that Bill you had where the room got bright, and he heard a voice, who are you to say there is no God? Mine was more of the educational variety, but it was preceded by the calamity that William James says is pretty common with spiritual experiences. And mine resulted in a miracle in that I'm able to do and be things I couldn't do and be before, which is like sober and mature and adult. Yeah. Okay, so I've had my own spiritual experience, and I'll let you know now that my beliefs arise more from my experiences than from anything I've read. Just like I know that I exist and I know that I'm alive because of my own experience, my own conscious awareness of myself, I also know without a doubt that there is a spiritual world beyond this physical one from my own experiences. And so, how did I get to be in this particular body? I have no idea, of course. I kind of imagine that maybe I existed in some, pre-form before this body was born, and I was notified, hey, we got a body available, you want to take it? And I thought, yeah, I'll take that one. Check it out. Yeah. And you might say, why? What's the purpose? And again, I have no idea. But since I'm free to speculate and nobody else has an answer, I'll just say maybe it was just to get off the couch. Okay, and so I'll end with that. Thanks so much for listening.
Our closing hymn this morning is in your teal hymnal, number 1011, Return Again.
And like the other one, there'll be 4 bars of intro. We'll sing the first 2 lines twice, and then the last 2 lines twice.
Please join in body or spirit by rising and singing. Our closing words are by one of the authors that Dan referenced, Arthur Stanley Eddington, The Nature of the Physical World. In the world of physics, we watch a shadow graph performance of the drama of familiar life. The shadow of my elbow rests on the shadow table as the shadow ink flows over the shadow paper. It's all symbolic, and as a symbol, the physicist leaves it. Then comes the alchemist mind, who transmutes the symbols. The sparsely spread nuclei of electric force becomes a tangible solid. Their restless agitation becomes the warmth of summer. The octave of ethereal vibrations becomes a gorgeous rainbow. Nor does the alchemy stop there. In the transmuted world, new significance arises, which are scarcely to be traced in the world of symbols, so that it becomes a world of beauty and purpose, and alas, suffering and evil. And as we extinguish the chalice, I have words by Adam Slate. Be kind, be brave, be just, be merciful, be hopeful. This is how we keep the chalice flame burning until we are together again to light it anew. And in our postlude, The word mantra translates into two words: mind uplift. In Hinduism, the soul, the self that makes up who we are, is part of the divinity that runs through all beings and that the gods and goddesses come from. The purpose of repeating a mantra, usually 108 times, is to use the spoken word to connect our thoughts to ourself, a way for us to understand that which is sacred and already a part of each of us. This mantra's 4 words translate to, "May all beings be happy."
लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु
लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु
लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु
लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु
लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु
लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु
लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु
लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु
लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु
लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु
लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु
Thank you to Janet and Jones and Cal, and thank you, Dan, for helping make this morning happen. And thank Mary for helping make the coffee.